We're going to break down the full data on Iran's proxy network, the specific cases where the US and Israel have been outmaneuvered, and why the current situation is pushing us toward a global breaking point. We're going to look at the history, the weapons, the money, and the terrifying future scenarios of the Wasp nest. To understand why we're in this mess, we have to go back. You can't understand today's headlines without understanding 1979. Before the Islamic Revolution, Iran was actually one of the US's closest allies in the region. The Shah of Iran was buying American fighter jets and keeping the oil flowing. But when the revolution happened, everything flipped overnight. Iran went from being a partner to a revolutionary state that viewed the US as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan. But Iran knew they couldn't win a traditional head-to-head war against the West. Their air force was outdated and their economy was shaky. So they came up with a genius and devious strategy. This is a term you need to know: forward defense. Instead of waiting for the war to come to Tehran, Iran decided to fight its wars in other people's backyards.
In the early 1980s, they sent operatives into Lebanon to help create Hezbollah. This was the blueprint. They realized that if they could give a local group enough missiles and money, that group could do Iran's dirty work. Over the next 4 decades, they repeated this model. In Gaza, they funded Hamas and Islamic Jihad. In Iraq, they built up massive Shia militias after the 2003 US invasion. In Yemen, they turned the Houthis from a mountain rebel group into a force that can shut down global shipping. Think about the strategic brilliance of this for a second. If Israel hits a Hamas commander, Iran doesn't lose a single Iranian soldier. If the US bombs a Houthi warehouse, Tehran stays perfectly safe. It's the ultimate asymmetric strategy. By 2023, Iran had successfully surrounded Israel with what analysts call a ring of fire. Thousands of rockets in the north, Hezbollah, thousands in the south, Hamas, and long-range drones in the east, Iraq, and south, Yemen. This is the Wasp nest, and for the US and Israel, trying to clear it out is like trying to put out a fire with a spoon. Every time you think you've got it, another spot flares up. So let's talk about right now. Why is the Wasp nest more disturbed than ever? Everything changed on October 7th, 2023. When Hamas launched that horrific attack on Israel, it triggered a domino effect across the entire axis of resistance. For years, the US and Israel relied on deterrence. The idea was, if you hit us, we'll hit you back so hard you'll regret it. But that's not working anymore.
Let's look at the Houthis in Yemen. This is one of the most shocking developments in modern geopolitics. You have a group that on paper should be no match for the US Navy, yet using cheap Iranian-designed drones, some costing only $20,000, they have effectively shut down the Suez Canal for many of the world's largest shipping companies. Think about that. A $20,000 drone versus a $2 billion US destroyer. Even if the US shoots the drone down, they're using a missile that costs $2 million. The math is completely in Iran's favor. This has forced global trade to divert around Africa, adding weeks to travel times and billions to costs. This is Iran showing the world, we can touch your wallet without ever firing a shot from our own soil. Then we had the moment the world held its breath. In April 2024, Israel struck an Iranian diplomatic building in Damascus, Syria, killing high-ranking IRGC generals. For years, Iran would have responded through a proxy, but this time, they fired over 300 drones and missiles directly from Iran at Israel. Now, Israel and its allies, the US, UK, Jordan, shot down 99% of them, but don't let that fool you. The data tells a different story. Iran wasn't trying to cause mass casualties, they were testing Israel's defenses. They wanted to see how the coordination worked, how long the batteries lasted, and what the radar signatures looked like. It was a stress test of the Wasp nest, and it proved that Iran is no longer afraid to go toe-to-toe. All right, let's get into the why. Why does this matter to someone sitting in New York, London, or Tokyo? It's not just about a local fight over land. This is about the 3 pillars of global stability: energy, trade, and nuclear proliferation.
Iran sits right on the Strait of Hormuz. About 20% of the world's oil passes through that tiny stretch of water. If the Wasp nest truly explodes into a full-scale war, Iran has threatened to close it. If that happens, oil prices don't just go up, they skyrocket. We're talking $150 or $200 a barrel. That would trigger a global recession almost instantly. As we saw with the Houthis, Iran is practicing economic asymmetric warfare. By making shipping dangerous, they are increasing the cost of everything, from the grain in your bread to the chips in your phone. They are proving that they don't need to defeat the US military. They just need to make the US presence in the Middle East too expensive to maintain. Here's the biggest data point of all. According to the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than ever before. They have enriched uranium to 60% purity. For context, 90% is weapons grade. They are weeks, not months, away from having enough material for several bombs. This is why Israel is so panicked. An Iran with a Wasp nest of proxies and a nuclear umbrella? That would change the Middle East forever. It would mean Israel could never again strike Hezbollah or Hamas without fearing a nuclear response from Tehran. Now, let's look at the big players. This isn't just a 1v1 fight. It's a multiplayer game of 3D chess.
The United States, the reluctant hegemon. The US is in a tough spot. On one hand, they have to support Israel. It's a core strategic and political necessity. On the other hand, the US is desperate to pivot to Asia to deal with China. They don't want another 20-year war in the Middle East. Every time the US gets pulled back in, sending carrier groups, bombing Houthi sites, they are playing right into Iran's hands. Iran wants the US to be bogged down. It drains American resources and makes the US look like an aggressor to the rest of the world. Israel, the existential struggle. For Israel, this isn't a geopolitical game, it's survival. They see the Wasp nest as a literal noose tightening around their neck. The internal pressure on the Israeli government is immense. How do you tell citizens in the north they can go home when Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets pointed at their bedrooms? This is why Israel is taking bigger risks, like the Damascus strike. They feel they have to break the Wasp nest now before Iran gets the nukes. China and Russia, the opportunists. Here's where it gets spicy. Russia and Iran have become best friends lately. Why? Because Russia needs Iranian drones for the war in Ukraine. In exchange, Russia is likely giving Iran advanced cyber warfare tools and maybe even fighter jets. China, meanwhile, is happy to sit back and watch the US waste trillions of dollars and years of focus on the Middle East. Plus, China buys a lot of Iranian oil through the dark fleet of tankers, providing Iran with the cash it needs to keep the Wasps fed.
Let's look at the actual numbers. When we say Wasp nest, what does that actually look like on a map? Let's break down the axis of resistance data. Hezbollah, Lebanon, they are the crown jewel. They have an estimated 150,000 to 200,000 rockets. They have elite Radwan forces who are battle-hardened from the Syrian civil war. They are more powerful than many national European armies. The Houthis, Yemen, they have ballistic missiles that can travel 2,000 kilometers. They've successfully hit targets in Israel and disrupted 12% of global maritime trade. PMF, Iraq and Syria. These are tens of thousands of Shia militiamen who are now integrated into the Iraqi state but take their orders from Tehran. They provide the land bridge that allows Iran to drive trucks full of weapons all the way from Tehran to the Mediterranean Sea. Hamas/PIJ, Gaza. Even after months of war, they remain a symbol of resistance that keeps Israel bogged down in urban combat. When you add it all up, Iran has a foreign legion of roughly 250,000 to 300,000 fighters across the region. And the best part for Iran, they don't have to pay them like a regular army. These groups are motivated by religion, local politics, and a shared hatred of the status quo. The cost to Iran? A few $1 billion a year. The cost to the US and Israel to counter them? Hundreds of billions.
So,
Where is this all heading? Let's look at the three most likely scenarios. Scenario 1, the slow burn, the most likely. In this scenario, we stay in this cycle of tit for tat. Israel strikes a proxy, the proxy fires some rockets, the US sanctions another Iranian company. It's a war of attrition. The goal for Iran is to slowly bleed Israel's economy and wear down American patience until the US eventually pulls out of the region, leaving Iran as the undisputed regional boss. Scenario 2, the Big Bang, the worst case. This happens if a red line is crossed. Maybe a Hezbollah rocket hits a crowded hospital in Tel Aviv, or Israel decides to launch a massive preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. This would trigger a total regional war. Hezbollah would fire thousands of rockets a day, overwhelming Israel's Iron Dome. The US would be forced to enter the war to save Israel. Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. The global economy would tank. It would be the most devastating conflict since World War II. Scenario 3, the grand bargain, the best case. This is the diplomatic miracle, a new deal where Iran agrees to freeze its nuclear program and stop arming proxies in exchange for a total lifting of sanctions and a new security framework. But let's be real. Right now, this feels like science fiction. There is so much blood and so much mistrust that a grand bargain seems almost impossible. So why does the Wasp nest disturb the US and Israel so much? Because it's a trap that was 40 years in the making. It's a masterpiece of asymmetric strategy. Iran has figured out how to use the West's own strengths, our interconnected economy, our value for human life, our democratic accountability, against us.
Every time the US or Israel tries to crush the nest, they realize that the nest is everywhere. It's in the mountains of Yemen, the streets of Beirut, the suburbs of Baghdad, and the tunnels of Gaza. The reality is, there is no military solution to the Wasp nest. You can't bomb an ideology, and you can't outspend a country that is willing to let its people suffer under sanctions for decades just to achieve a strategic goal. The US and Israel are facing a choice: keep poking the nest and hope they don't get stung to death, or find a way to live in a world where Iran is a major, albeit dangerous, power. But here's the final thought I want to leave you with. In a game where one side is playing for the next election and the other side is playing for the next century, who do you think is eventually going to win? What do you think? Is a major war between the US and Iran inevitable, or is there a way out that we're just not seeing? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this deep dive helpful, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more geopolitical puzzles to solve. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.